Pack your bags, old man. I want you out of this house by Friday. That's what my son-in-law said to me. Not shouted, said. Calm. Like he was telling me the weather. My daughter was standing right behind him in the kitchen doorway, and she didn't say a single word. I set down my coffee cup. I looked at him. I looked at her. And I nodded. I didn't argue. Didn't beg. Didn't ask why, even though I already knew why. I'd known for a while, if I'm being honest with myself. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. My name is Russell. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer. Retired early because I'd saved well and invested wisely, and I've been on my own since my wife Patricia passed 4 years ago. Lung cancer. 12 weeks from diagnosis to gone. Some things you never fully recover from. After she died, I sold our house in Flagstaff. Too many rooms. Too many mornings where I'd walk into the kitchen expecting to smell her coffee and find nothing. My daughter, Wendy, called me 2 weeks after the sale and said she'd been talking with her husband, Dexter, and they wanted me to come stay with them. They had a 4-bedroom house in a suburb outside of Raleigh. The kids were 7 and 9 at the time. She said the boys missed their grandpa and that I shouldn't be alone. I thought she meant it. I moved in on a Tuesday in March, 3 years ago. I paid for my own moving truck. I paid for the new bedroom furniture because I didn't want to bring anything from the old house. Too much weight to carry. First thing Dexter said when I got there was that it was great having me and that they wanted me to feel at home. He shook my hand. Firm grip. Looked me in the eye. I remember thinking, this is going to be okay. Within the first month, I started paying them $2,000 every month. I offered. They didn't ask. I knew what groceries cost, what utilities cost, and I wasn't the kind of man who sits in someone else's house and contributes nothing. $2,000 became $2,800 by the second year, because I noticed Wendy stress-eating cereal at 11 at night after bills, and I couldn't just watch that. I also watched the boys, Cooper and Miles, every day after school. Dexter's job had him traveling 2 or 3 days a week, and Wendy worked in hospital administration, long hours, unpredictable schedule. I picked the boys up at 3:15. I helped with homework. I made dinner 4 nights a week. I fixed the garage door when it started sticking. I repainted the back fence in August because Dexter mentioned the HOA had sent a letter. I wasn't a guest. I was a functioning part of that household. But here's the thing about being useful. Some people start to see useful and start to think disposable. It's a slow slide. You don't notice it happening until you're already at the bottom. It started small. Dexter stopped saying thank you for dinner. Then stopped acknowledging it at all. Then one night, he came home, and there were dishes in the sink from a recipe I'd tried that hadn't quite worked, and he said, not to me, but loud enough for me to hear, I come home after 12 hours on the road, and this is what I walk into. Wendy didn't correct him. Then there was the question of the lake house. I own a property on Lake Norman. Bought it in 2019 as an investment. Always planned to retire there. 3 bedrooms, dock, about 900 feet of waterfront. It's worth somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million now, depending on the season and who you ask. I also have retirement accounts, some commercial real estate holdings, and savings. I don't talk about money. I never have. My father taught me that a man who broadcasts his net worth is either insecure or asking for trouble, usually both. But somehow, Dexter found out. I don't know exactly how. Maybe Wendy told him more than she'd told him. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have when he borrowed my laptop one afternoon. Either way, something shifted in him after that. Nothing dramatic, just a new edge, a new way of looking at me across the dinner table. Like he was recalculating. The requests started shortly after, small ones at first. Dexter mentioned that the SUV needed new tires and times were tight. I bought the tires. Then the boys needed new baseball gear for spring league. I handled it. Then there was a weekend in the Outer Banks that they wanted to take, but couldn't quite afford. And somehow I was paying for the rental and the groceries and the gas. I didn't mind. They were my grandkids. I wanted to see them happy. But then Dexter started talking about the lake house. You know, Russell, that property's just sitting there. We could use it more than you do. You could put it in all our names. Simple legal thing. Wendy's family too, after all. He said it casually, like it was a reasonable suggestion, like he was doing me a favor by thinking of it. I changed the subject. He brought it up again 2 months later. Then again. Each time more direct. The last time, he framed it as a matter of fairness, that Wendy was his wife, that she'd be inheriting everything anyway, that it just made sense to formalize it now. Why wait, he said. What are you waiting for? I told him I'd think about it. I had no intention of thinking about it. Around that same time, I started noticing other things. Wendy had started speaking to me differently. Shorter. Sighing when I asked questions. There was a particular Sunday afternoon where I came downstairs and she and Dexter stopped talking the moment they heard me on the stairs. I stood there in the kitchen doorway and asked if something was wrong. She said no, nothing, and went back to her phone. I started sleeping poorly, started spending more time at the lake house on weekends just to breathe. I'd drive the 2.5 hours on Friday afternoon and come back Sunday evening. The boys would ask where Grandpa was going. I'd say fishing. Cooper, the older one, would hug my leg and tell me to bring him back something. I always did. Then came November. I came home from a weekend at the lake earlier than expected. Left Saturday evening instead of Sunday. Bad weather rolling in. Pulled into the driveway and saw Dexter's car there, which surprised me, because he'd said he had a work trip. I walked in through the garage. They were in the living room, and there was another couple there, people I didn't recognize. I later learned it was Dexter's brother and his wife. I said hello. Dexter looked at me the way you look at someone who's shown up to the wrong party. Later that night, after the guests left, he knocked on my bedroom door. I said, "Come in." He stood in the doorway, didn't sit down, didn't come in fully, and said he wanted to talk about the living situation. Said it wasn't working anymore. Said Wendy needed her space, and that having me there was putting stress on their marriage. I asked if Wendy felt that way. He said she did. I asked if she could come tell me herself. He said she was tired. I slept about 2 hours that night. Lay there in the dark, going back through 3 years, counting up dinners, counting up school pickups, counting up birthday parties. I'd organized, and medical appointments. I'd driven them too, and checks I'd written without being asked. Trying to find the moment where I'd become the problem. I couldn't find it. And that was the hardest part. The following Monday morning, Wendy left for work early. I was having breakfast when Dexter came downstairs in his jacket, keys in hand, and said, calm, like I told you. No heat in his voice at all. I need you out by Friday, Russell. We've made our decision. I said, all right. He nodded once and walked out the door. I sat there with my eggs and my coffee and I thought, okay then. I called my attorney that afternoon. Not because I was angry. I was past angry, honestly. I was somewhere quieter than angry. I called him because I'm the kind of man who acts instead of stews, and I needed to start moving. I told him what was happening. He asked if there was any financial arrangement in writing. There wasn't. He asked about the property questions. I told him about the lake house conversations. He told me what I needed to do, and I told him I agreed, and we made a plan. By Wednesday, I had a storage unit reserved and a moving company scheduled. I also called a property manager I'd worked with before and told him I needed to get the lake house rental ready by the end of the month. It had been sitting as a personal property. Now, it was going to start earning. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving early. Thursday evening, I packed everything into my truck and the moving van. The boys were at their after-school program until 5. I finished by 4:30. I left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. Not emotional, not vindictive. Just, took you at your word. Best of luck. Russell. And my cell number, in case of emergency. For the boys. Not for him. I drove to the lake house, and I sat on the dock until it was too dark to see the water. And I'll tell you, I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat there listening to the water and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Quiet. Real quiet. The kind that belongs to you. I had a good attorney, and I had patience. And those two things are worth more than most people realize. 2 weeks went by. I got the lake house set up, got some furniture moved around, started running in the mornings again for the first time since I'd moved in with them. One morning, I drove to a nursery and bought 6 rose bushes and planted them along the south side of the house. My wife used to say a house isn't a home until something's growing in the yard. Then my phone rang. Wendy. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying she wanted to talk, that things had been said in haste, that she missed me. Her voice was tight in a particular way, not grief exactly. More like the voice a person uses when they've run some numbers and the numbers aren't good. I texted back, "I'm well. I hope the boys are good. I'll be in touch." I didn't call. The following week, a certified letter went out from my attorney's office. I'd done some restructuring. The $2,800 per month I'd been contributing, gone, obviously. But more than that, there was a promissory note they hadn't known about. Over the course of 3 years, between the SUV tires, the Outer Banks trip, the baseball equipment, the various other things I'd paid for at Dexter's suggestion, I'd kept records. I keep records of everything. The total was $41,600. The letter gave them 90 days to repay it or acknowledge the debt. There was also a letter from a different attorney, the estate attorney. I'd updated my will. The lake house and the remainder of my estate would go into a trust for Cooper and Miles, to be distributed when they turned 25. Wendy and Dexter would receive nothing directly. The boys were taken care of. The boys were taken care of. The Paris. I also removed Wendy from the beneficiary designation on 2 accounts where she'd been listed. Her name was replaced with a charitable foundation I've supported for years, a land conservation nonprofit out of Asheville. I'm not a cruel man. I want to be clear about that. I didn't do any of this to punish my grandchildren or to burn everything to the ground. I did it because when someone shows you clearly what they think you're worth, when your own daughter stands behind her husband while he tells you to be gone by Friday, you have to take them at their word. You have to respect their decision. They made their choice. I made mine. Dexter called 4 times in the 3 days after the letters arrived. I didn't answer. On the 5th call, he left a voicemail that started professionally and deteriorated rapidly. He said the promissory note was completely fabricated, that I had no right to change my will, that Wendy was devastated. I saved the voicemail. My attorney has a copy. Wendy sent a long email. I read it twice. She said I was being vindictive. She said she'd always loved me and that she'd just been under a lot of stress. She said Dexter wasn't always easy to live with and that she'd been caught in the middle. She said I owed it to the boys to be reasonable. That word, owed. I've been thinking about it ever since. I wrote back one time. I told her I loved her. I told her I would always love her because she was my daughter, and nothing changes that. I told her I would be at every birthday, every school play, every graduation if she wanted me there. I told her the boys would always know their grandfather loved them, but I also told her that love does not mean unlimited financial exposure, and that a man who is asked to leave by Friday should be believed when he says he'll leave. I haven't heard from Dexter since. Wendy and I have spoken twice. Both calls were short, careful, like talking across a fence neither of us built, but both of us were standing at. It will take time. Maybe it will never be fully what it was. I've made my peace with that possibility, even though it costs something every day to hold that peace. I took Cooper and Miles to a baseball game last month. Wendy dropped them off at my lake house on a Saturday morning, and I had them for the whole day. We grilled hot dogs at lunch. Miles caught a foul ball, 3rd row, reached right over the guy in front of him, 9 years old and absolutely fearless. Cooper fell asleep on the drive home, and I carried him in from the truck the same way I used to carry him when he was 4. Back when everything was simpler, I sat on the dock after they left. The sun was going down over the water, and the rose bushes were starting to come in along the south side of the house, just like she would have wanted. I am 64 years old. I have a good attorney, a paid-off lake house, a property manager who knows what he's doing, and 2 grandsons who think I hum the moon. I have mornings that belong to me, and evenings that belong to me, and a quiet that I earned. I want to say something to anyone out there who is in the house but not in the home, who is contributing and being tolerated, who is useful but not valued, who keeps waiting for the family to see what you're giving. Don't wait for them to come around. Get your papers in order. Know what you own and what you're owed. And when someone tells you to leave by Friday, believe them. Pack your things and let them discover exactly what Friday costs. They'll figure it out. They always do. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. Out here on the dock, with the water doing what water does, just moving, indifferent, steady. I've had more quiet than I've had in years. And quiet has a way of making things clear that noise kept hidden. Here's what I know now. What happened with Wendy and Dexter didn't start the morning he told me to be gone by Friday. It started long before that. It started every time I handed over money without being asked. Every time I fixed something without being thanked. Every time I watched Dexter look at me across the dinner table with that new calculation in his eyes, and I told myself it was nothing. The thing about allowing yourself to be taken for granted is that it doesn't happen to you. You participate in it. That's the hard truth I had to swallow. I'm not saying I was wrong to help my family. I'd do most of it again. But there's a difference between giving freely and giving in a way that trains people to expect. I blurred that line for 3 years, and they walked right across it. What I did after. The attorney, the letters, the will. None of that was revenge. I want to be honest about that. A man who acts out of revenge is still being controlled by the people who hurt him. I wasn't interested in control anymore, theirs or mine. I was interested in clarity. There's a difference between punishing someone and simply removing yourself from a situation that had stopped being honest. I removed myself. The consequences were theirs to deal with. Dexter thought I was a soft old man who needed a place to sleep. He looked at me and saw a resource with a sentimental attachment to his wife and grandkids. Something to be managed, redirected, eventually transferred over like a title deed. What he didn't understand, and what took me a while to understand about myself, is that the same discipline that built everything I have doesn't disappear just because someone gets comfortable around you. It's still there. It's just quiet. That's the thing about people who confuse patience with weakness. They eventually find out. Cooper and Miles are going to be fine. I know that the way I know most things I care about, not because someone told me, but because I've been watching. Cooper has his mother's stubbornness and his grandfather's ability to sit still and think. Miles catches foul balls in the 3rd row at 9 years old. Those boys are going to build their own lives. And when the trust opens at 25, it'll be a foundation, not a crutch. That distinction matters more than the dollar amount. As for Wendy, I love my daughter. I will love her when I'm gone and probably in whatever comes after that. But love doesn't require me to fund a household that dismissed me, and it doesn't require me to pretend that Friday didn't happen. She has to decide what kind of person she wants to be. That's not my work to do. It never was. What I can tell you, what I'd say to anyone sitting where I was sitting 3 years ago, paying rent in a house where they weren't really welcome, is this: your value is not determined by how much you contribute to people who don't see it. Get your paperwork in order. Keep your records. Know what you own. And the moment someone tells you, calm as weather, to be gone by Friday, believe every word of it. Then leave. Quietly. Completely. And let them open the refrigerator on Saturday morning and start doing the math.